Unacademy. Let's crack it.
So let's get started. So Raja, you're asking how is my journey, right, from intermediate to now, right? So you're asking about my competitive programming journey. Let me talk about my competitive programming journey. So yeah, I got exposed to competitive programming only when I joined my college at IIT Bombay when I took up computer science engineering. Like till then, I never really did any sort of coding. I didn't know like anything in C++ or any other language also. So yeah, initially it was hard. Like the first semester, like there are many people who kind of knew basics of coding, like languages and stuff. So they were like quite ahead in understanding and picking up the classes. So initially it was hard. Like I had to put some extra time in labs and to understand the syntaxes and like all the basics, how things are working, like getting my hands dirty on compiling and running stuff. But yeah, like specifically competitive programming, I think I started in my somewhere in middle of third semester. Basically, how I got exposed to it was our seniors introduced it to me, like 1 or 2 years seniors to us held a session on competitive programming, what it is. So they kind of explained simple question like there was this online judge called Spoj. So they explained a couple of questions in that, and it kind of excited me a lot, like because I was always into math. Like I really like math since my childhood. So that kind of like dragged me into this competitive programming. When I first came across that concept, or like the way like they can use code to solve such kind of problems, it kind of interested me a lot. Then I started picking up on my own. Like I started solving questions on Spotch. Like I sorted them by number of users solved, and I started solving them on my own. And like there were a couple of friends that I had who were very actively solving them also. So I just had hey Sri. So yeah, like I kind of solved some questions with them. Then I think at the end, towards the start of the second semester, we kind of decided like we'll participate in ACM ICPC. So like in the fourth semester, we did it very seriously. Like we formed a team at the start of fourth semester, and yes, in the second areas. So basically, I started in my third semester, uh, and in second year, we kind of like when we were exposed to this competitive programming and stuff, I was quite excited, and so I decided like I will pursue it to some extent. Like me and my friends were constantly doing questions on Spoj and stuff, and then we got exposed to Codeforces, CodeChef, all these websites. So yeah, and in fourth semester we kind of formed a team and thought like, okay, let's try to practice, and we started practicing regularly, like my different concepts. We used to learn, and we just used to solve. Initially, our goal used to be to solve like Div 2 C. If you know what Div 2 competitions are, like in Codeforces there are Division 1, Division 2. So Div 2 C used to be like kind of slightly on harder end at that time. So we used to Div 2 A and B used to be pretty simple. So we used to target due to C, like for a month or so. We always wanted to solve many due to C's, and then we slowly due to D's and like stuff like that. And yeah, I think fourth semester we kind of did like some contests here and there in CodeChef, Codeforces, CodeChef long challenges. I used to do all these things. Then in third year, I think like in fifth semester also we continued doing this. Uh, I'm not sure when the online contest was. Like it's probably middle of fifth semester or something like that. Yeah, we did quite well in that. Uh, and then from then, when once we did very like pretty good in the online contest, we started practicing as a team, like solving actual. So yeah, so after getting a good rank in online contest, we started practicing as a team, like solving 5 hour contests during weekends, like in the actual format, like actual regional format. So yeah, that was quite interesting actually. Like we kind of knew weaknesses and strengths of each other, and So yeah, like we focused on some of, like I used to be pretty strong in dynamic programming, and yeah, one of my teammates used to be strong in graphs, and one of them used to be strong in like geometry, because geometry required a lot of heavy implementations. So yeah, we kind of divided stuff like that and kind of focused a lot on our own topics. And yeah, I think first, so that way we got selected to the world finals in my third year. Uh, yeah, like also there was this there was another team from our college which came first at that time in another regionals in Madras, I think so. So we had like, there is a rule that like only one team can go to world finals in a year from a single college. So it was kind of, it is up to the college to decide which team to go, like because there were we got first in one regionals, and there was another team from our college who were senior to us, like they were 1 year senior to us. So they got first in another regionals, like in, I don't remember the exact regional, I think it was Madras or something. So we got in Kolkata or Kharagpur, I'm not sure. So then what our college decided was they held an internal contest, kind of a tiebreaker contest. Then yeah, like I think we did better than them in that contest. So then yeah, I think since quite good, so we got our place sealed in world finals. So first world finals, I think it was in Thailand. So I, was it my first time going out of India? No, I think I had gone out of India. That was my second time, I think, so going out of India. So it was quite fun. Like it was like around 5 or 6 days. Initially, uh, there were some like practice sessions and stuff like that. I mean, the organizers were very like Thailand is like very homely place. So yeah, the organizers gave us a great accommodation and like took care of everything. So we just had to go there and participate. It was great experience. Like we didn't do very well. I mean, we did not do very well in the first time we went there. I think in India we were placed like third or fourth, uh, and like we were kind of disappointed because like we didn't solve some questions which we could actually do. I mean, they are not out of our reach. But then yeah, we saw somehow like the contest pressure and stuff like that. We were not able to do very well in that contest. So disappointed then. So we came back and thought like next year we'll have to come back stronger because we have one more chance. That was in my third year. So in fourth year, like we practiced even more, like as a group, as a team, and we like concentrated on more harder problems, like increasing the level of the problems that we solve. Uh, yeah, like we used to solve like Russian contests, Chinese contests. They'll have their practice contests, their regional contests, and everything like that. Uh, and yeah, I think we very comfortably reached into the finals this time. Like we didn't have any hiccups. Like again, I think we placed first, I think so, in Kolkata again, and in Amritapuri also we were placed like second or third. So yeah, this time finals was in US. It was in a city called Rapid City. So yeah, it like US visa was all big of a headache, but yeah, it was some sort of an experience. Uh, so for us, like college used to fund all these trips, like trips to you first time to Thailand and second time to US. So it was like kind of very good on their college part to kind of fund us. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to pay on our own. Like the ticket itself was around like 1.2 lakhs or something. So yeah, like up and down, I mean. So that's how we went to US finals in US. Then I think it was quite, there we did very well actually. We placed first in India, like we were first in India, and we were the only team to solve 5 questions. I think like all other teams in India solved only 4. And yeah, overall I think we placed like 34th or something uh, in the overall standings. We were close to solving another question, but we didn't have, like we spent a lot of time debugging one question, so we were not able to solve. If I had solved that question, I think we would have been around 20, 22, something like that. But yeah, it was a great experience. We all of us were happy that we did much better than last time. So yeah, so to answer the first question, this was my journey, competitive programming journey. So from intermediate to now, I think mostly it is about practicing consistently and solving slightly harder problems every time. Job 2, okay, sure. Yeah. In competitive programming specifically, like it's about solving consistently and slowly increasing the hardness of the questions that you're solving, and also like any question that you are not able to solve, kind of up solving them and trying to analyze why you weren't able to solve, like what are the approaches that you thought about while solving the question, and what was the actual approach that was leading to the solution. Let's say you did not solve, the way I used to think was, these are all the approaches that I had tried, and I would afterwards look at the editorial or ask someone and then see why didn't I get that idea, or if I got the idea, why didn't I pursue it fully to the solution, like what was missing. So I used to analyze like this. That kind of helped me increase my level, I think so, from intermediate. So, and I want Google food. Sure. Sometime if you are in Bangalore and this pandemic is over, let me know. I can get you the Google food. So yeah, next question was, how do you learn something new? I mean, JEE Topper and ASM are not so easy, and also Google SDE. So just want to know how you learn things. Sure. So Sri, how do I learn? So firstly, anything new is not very easy, like is not very easy to learn. So it'll take time. Firstly, you need to have the right motivation. Why, like you need to know why are you doing this. Like for me, when I started competitive programming, because I was very interested in math right from my childhood, it immediately drew me into it. Like when seniors introduced me to the single question, the question was, I think, finding longest divisor of a number or something like that, like largest divisor of a number or something like that. So like the solution that they presented, it just attracted me towards that whole field of competitive programming because I was very much into math. So I didn't really had to search for motivation for competitive programming specifically, but yeah, like you need to find that right motivation. For example, like getting a good job might be the right motivation, or just enjoying the problems, like having the fun, that might be a motivation. So you need to have the right motivation first. So based on that motivation, like yeah, you can think how much time you want to spend and how do you want to spend your time. So like if there are three parts to this question: JEE Topper, and ICPC. So JEE, I think, like as I mentioned, I was very much into math. Like chemistry, I never used to like that much, but physics and math, I used to do quite well. I used to like them. Like I used to enjoy the concepts a lot. Math specifically, I have been to many like Olympiads also. Like if you know about Regional Maths Olympiad, Indian National Mathematics Olympiad, INMO, I had participated in all those things. So yeah, math is kind of something that I liked since my childhood. So like JEE was mostly math and physics for me. Chemistry I used to do because I wanted to score good marks. Though I know like organic chemistry specifically I used to enjoy, but like physical and other stuff I never used to enjoy that much. So yeah, for JEE, I think mostly it is about giving proper good amount of time, learning everything properly, and being consistent. I think so. Like I remember my JEE times, like 11th and 12th were basically like only studies. Like like the timetable used to be like from morning 6:30 to night 8:30 every day, like even Sundays. So once in 2 weeks we used to have one day off. That's all, half day, like from 3 o'clock or so. That's all. So that used to be my routine for like 1.5 to 2 years in my 11th and 12th. So that, I mean, at that time I never used to feel stressed or anything because I used to like this math and physics a lot. Chemistry used to be boring, but still I used to find some interesting things in it. So that's how JEE kind of was easy for me to do. I mean, I never really took a lot of stress about it. ACM ICPC, again, as I mentioned, it was just my interest. Like competitive programming as such was very interesting to me at that time. And Google SDE, yeah, I think software engineering is slightly different. Like you need to know other things, not just competitive programming. Like in your day-to-day work, you don't really use competitive programming that much. So you need to know about development, like how things work, like how do you deploy some things to production, and what are production issues in production that can be caused, how do you deal with them, all these things. These I think I learned, some of them I learned during my internships. I did 2 internships, actually 3. I did one in a startup called Function Space, and I did one in American Express. Yeah, and there was one other startup that I did an internship in. So yeah, like startups gave me some exposure to these real world things. And as far as cracking interviews, I think like competitive programming was played a main role. So it was not really difficult like cracking these interviews because of my experience in ACMICPC. So yeah, I think learning new things just basically boils down to first understanding what is your interest, like how, why are you doing that, and then like giving good amount of time, like proper productive time towards it. uh, yeah, you need to know how to get better at it also, like because you need to have some mentor or someone you can look up to who can advise you in the right direction in how to improve. I think those are the key things you want to understand first for learning new things. Okay, so I want Google Food. Yeah, I mentioned about this, right? Like if you're ever in, if the pandemic is over and if you're ever in Bangalore or Hyderabad, I can uh, help you get Google Food. Can you explain about ACM ICPC? I don't know anything. ACM ICPC is nothing but it's a contest that is held worldwide, like every year. So what, like basically every university can send a single team, uh, and there'll be some regional contests like Asian contests, like not specifically Asian, like there'll be some Indian specific contests, some Russian specific contests, like all over the world they will hold some contests, uh, and select one team. Like probably from India they select 5 teams also, and from Russia they select 5 teams, and like that from all over the world they select some number of teams, a fixed number of teams, and then all of them will compete at a single place, which will be selected by the host. Uh, I think overall there will be around 120 teams, like 115 to 120 teams all over the world, and all of them will compete on a single problem set for 5 hours. So that is ACM ICPC finals. And like basically to go there, you'll have to first do an online contest, which will kind of um, help you get selected to regionals. And once you go to regionals, there'll be I think at my time there were 3 regionals. I don't know now how many are there. There are more, I guess, now. And after that, there is something called India finals that they introduced later. I'm not sure if it is still there or not. So these are all the stages. Once you get qualified in all this, you'll get to world finals, where you compete with many other teams across the world. So it's more everything is based on competitive programming only, like nothing else. Only questions. They'll give you a question, constraints. An input will be there, and you need to code it and like get the solution accepted. So yeah, that is about ACM ICPC. Bharat, hope that helped a bit. She says, I too like math. That's great. What should be the strategy for starting final year student? Like I am nearby intermediate, 3-star coach fully. So better advice for interviews. What to follow? Okay. So Akshit, right. So for final year student, I think if you're focusing for interviews, then like you don't need to do a lot of competitive programming. Interviews don't ask so difficult questions. Their questions are mostly on good understanding of basic concepts like dynamic programming, some data structures and stuff like that. So you don't need anything deep. You can like learn concepts from lead code. Like you can solve questions from lead code on every topic, or like you can so like check some interview questions of companies. You can solve by them. But yeah, what I would suggest is when you're solving a question, let's say you do not know any concept. Let's say you came across some, let's say you never heard about DFS before, and you came across this depth first search, and they are using something to do using DFS to solve a question. If whenever you come across such things, like, wherever you solve a question, like Lead Code, Code Forces, CodeChef, even if you solve, like if your aim is only to crack interviews, and you're in final year, I would suggest like do Lead Code, like Code Forces, like probably first 3 questions in Team 2, like ABC, and like some easier questions in CodeChef, just to get hang of thinking and stuff like that, like ad hoc questions. And mostly in CodeChef and CodeForce you'll find ad hoc questions, so you'll be used to doing that also. So once you see any new concept, go through it, like read about it, read through blogs, YouTube. Nowadays there are so much material, like, and in an academy platform also. I myself have posted a lot of content. I mean, not a lot, but until now it has been like 1.5 to 2 months, I guess. So like you can follow that content, or like any other instructor's content which you find good. So if you don't understand any concept, try to understand the internals of it, like why is it working. Like let's say instead of just leaving, let's say you go through the extras algorithm, don't just leave it, just understand why is it working. Okay, that will kind of help you solve harder problems also, not just that problem. Like if there is some modification in the algorithm, how do you do it? So that is where like understanding the algorithm helps uh, uh, like solving harder problems. So that's why in my classes also, whenever I try to bring up any new algorithm, I kind of explain the proofs for them to so that students understand why things are working and how they are working, instead of just blindly using the algorithm. So that is really useful. But yeah, like if you think that is slightly difficult, you can stick to learning the concept and how can it be used. That is also okay, but I would suggest learning the internals of an algorithm or data structure also. That is quite useful. Okay, so I think yeah, solving questions, to summarize the answer for this, like solving questions on lead code, easy code versus CodeChef questions, and some interview questions asked in previous job interviews or something like that, you can do them. And whenever you don't understand a concept, read through it. Like do not just leave it, understand it, try to understand the internals, or like if it is going too much over your head, at least understand in what all use cases can you use it. Like see other use cases, how are they using this specific algorithm or data structure. I think that should be the strategy for interviews. Akshit, hope that answer your question. Oh, so Bharat asked, do you remember HC Verma, OP Tandon, Cengage? Yes, of course I do remember all of them. I spent 2 years on them, all of these. So you're from Sri Chaitanya or Narayana? I joined in Narayana, but at some point they kind of merged, and then again I don't know what is happening with them, but yeah, they merged at some point, and I think now they are separate again. Not sure. So yeah, initially I joined Narayana. I joined in my 10th class. So 10th class was normal, like not really into IT, but 11th and 12th I did prepare for IT a lot. So Ayush asks, I am in 4th year. Should I more focus on DSA problem solving or do competitive programming for off-campus interviews? So competitive programming is not really required if your only aim is for campus interviews, Ayush. So yeah, you can just, as I mentioned, like you can solve lead code, Codeforce's easy questions and CodeChef easy questions. I think that should be enough for campus interviews. Like you don't need to do hardcore competitive programming if for interviews specifically. Like nobody asks very difficult competitive programming questions in interviews. So yeah, I would suggest like do understand the concepts, like internals of the concepts, as I mentioned earlier. That is more important, I think so. Okay, so yeah, to answer your question, like you should concentrate on DSA problem solving from like oriented towards interviews. You need not do competitive programming, like you need not do like harder questions in Codeforce. If you're doing really want to do competitive programming, you'll have to kind of learn many new things. DB itself is such a big concept. Like there are, I mean, some of the DB concepts I think we discussed in our classes also, but like defining the state itself is so important in dynamic programming questions. Like there are many questions which I have hard to come up with DB states. So I don't think you need to go so much deep into competitive programming for off-campus interviews. Okay. Next, how do you manage your time, sir? Yeah. So like, I think I focus one thing at a time. Like, for example, if I think about these classes, so I'll first structure like before I schedule the class, I'll think in my mind, like what are the things I want to cover in this class? What are the algorithms or data structures, or what are the concepts basically I want to cover? And then I'll think of some examples, what I want to present and how do I want to explain them to you guys. So basically, yeah, like my main thing is focusing on one thing at a time. Like when I'm doing that, I will kind of put my office laptop aside so that I don't get any notifications, or even my mobile aside. Like I don't get distracted by any notifications. Also in my work time, I think, yeah, again, I don't put my phone aside or anything. I'll just focus on my work. I'll do it for some time, like whatever, probably like 6 hours, 7 hours, depending on the day and what are the required things that are needed on that particular day. But yeah, whenever I'm doing my work, I usually don't put my phone aside or any other distractions aside. I'll just focus on my work. And then once I'm done, I'll do something else. Like probably check my phone or like think about these classes or scheduling these classes and these things. Yeah. So basically, if you can do this, like doing one thing at a time and focusing on that, I think that will help you manage your time better. Like I also actually read books, play a lot. I play badminton and table tennis on regular basis. So all these things I am able to do because I just do one thing at a time. Like I focus on that one thing and then try to have some. So I'll put some time limit and kind of try to complete things in that time. If I'm not able to complete, I'll do it next day. But so I'll have this kind of boundaries where I want to, on which time I want to work on what. So I think that is how I manage my time. Hope that answered your question, Sri. In Google, on what technologies do you work? And basically, what are those things which will be used for developers, like in Google, like for example, Git, that you can name few of them. So Bharat, Google is very different in this sense. Like Google has all internal technologies. It does not use anything external. Like, so it uses all the technologies that were built by Google only and are applicable only to Google. So but yeah, I think Microsoft uses Git-like systems. So yeah, basically one thing any developer, it's useful for any developer is thinking in terms of edge cases, like thinking critically in terms of edge cases. So mostly what happens in development, most of the logic will be correct, but some edge case will be wrong, which is causing crashes, like once it goes to production, because usually we write some tests, unit tests or integration tests we write, but they don't cover these edge cases. So thinking in terms of those edge cases that I can take back from competitive programming is like thinking critically about all the edge cases. So that is something that you want to develop, and it is very useful in going forward also in your developer career also, like because like usually basically I work on Gmail search in Google. So Gmail is such a big product, like huge product. So even if you make something small mistake, it affects so many users. So you have to be extremely meticulous in what you're doing. So if there is something that I would like you to try developing is trying to think in terms of edge cases, like what can be the possible things that can go wrong, because there are always things that can go wrong in such huge systems. Okay, so that is something that you can see. Regarding systems, I think those are some things that can be picked very quickly. Those are not at all an issue. Like if you like start working on them for 1-2 months, you'll pick them easily. They are not very difficult. But thinking the things that I'm saying, right? Like thinking languages, like if you know one language, you can learn another language very easily. It doesn't take much time. Like some syntaxes here and there you might have to refer, but then it's not very difficult. Like let's say C++, you will be able to code in Java, Python, anything. Like some syntaxes will be different, but not so difficult that it'll take a lot of time to learn. But more importantly, thinking in terms of edge cases and thinking critically about the problem is something that you want to develop. Okay, so next question: how many questions would be sufficient on lead code? I wouldn't say like maybe feel like I wouldn't say number of questions as such, because it is different for every person and it is not a constant thing. But I think there are lots of messages. Let's quickly go through the questions. Okay, how many questions would be sufficient? So what I'll try to say is, okay, let me present my screen also so that you guys know that what I'm reading. The question was how many questions would be sufficient. Yeah, it is not specific to it's like it depends on the person, Ayush. So I would say like until when you're comfortable, like let's say by looking at the question, you get this confidence that okay, I can solve this. I need not solve this, but I can solve this. If I give some time, like if I think for some time, I'll be able to solve that question. If you get that kind of confidence, then you can stop solving questions in that particular topic. Okay, let's say you're taking binary search and you solve some certain questions, and then next time you see a question, and then you kind of read through the question and get the idea. Okay, this is how I want to implement. Like it shouldn't take much time. Like if you have enough practice, by looking at the question, you will get some sort of idea. Like what algorithm do you want to use, and how do you want to approach the question. So once you're comfortable, yeah, you can stop solving questions on that particular topic, and you can move to another topic, or like you can solve. So I would say until you get that confidence that you are able to solve some medium level questions easily without much thinking. Like you don't need much time. I think you need some more practice. So I would suggest you practice until you get that confidence. Okay. What projects we can do in web development? I also like Tag Build Answer. Thank you. Okay. Good question. Technologies. Okay, sure. First, let's see. Let me see if there are any similar questions. Sir, what is the difference between SD1? Is like what? Okay, sure. First, let's see what projects we can do in web development. Okay. So in my college, I did one hostel mess management system kind of. So it involved databases and some web development. So we had to store. So we had many hostels in IIT Bombay. Like there were like 15, 16 hostels. So we had to. There used to be different menus for each hostel every day. So it was a one-stop place for everybody to see what is the menu at any hostel. So we usually some hostels used to have bad food and some hostels used to have good food. So people wanted to know which hostel had good food so that they can go to that hostel and eat. So this was the project that I did, like a web interface where you had this like selection of hostel feedback system. You will be able to give feedback on how the food was, and you can like there was also this login system and check-in system where you in which hostel do you want to eat today and stuff like that. So this is something that I did, but there are many other web development projects that you can do. Can like I see in LinkedIn many people are doing, like some people build some WhatsApp prototype, and I don't know, like you can just build some organizer like a tracking system, ticket tracking system. Like there are many options, I think, for web development. You can, if you're very new, you can start with some small game on web, like on a browser, and then slowly increase the complexity, I would say. Okay, so yeah, and you can also like add more things like databases to your web development projects. Some OS topics you can add. Maybe you can write some terminal on a browser. You can implement some terminal commands like sudo, like ls, cat. If you use Linux, you will know these commands, right? Cat, ls. These kind of commands, how to implement them. So you can do it on a browser. You can do stuff like that. There are many things you can do. So these are some things that you can try. Like if you are very at the very beginning stage, you can start with some small game, like probably like Tetris or something on a browser. Okay. Hope that answered your question, Ayush. Like if you want more, you can ask me again. Yeah, good question. And technologies. So right. Technologies, basically I work on C++ mostly. We sometimes we code in Java also, like depending on. So basically it's team dependent at Google. Which language we code, which language the team wants to maintain the coding. Okay, so that is mostly it. And yeah, sometimes we code in Python also, like depending, again, like if you're making some changes in another team's code base which has dependency on our team, then we code in other languages also. So that is how it works. So but mostly I code in C++ only. So yeah. Next is, sir, what is the difference between SD1 and SD3 in terms of work at Google? Like what quality should a person imbibe as he could be good developer at Google? Sure, Akshay, that's a great question. So mostly like going from SD1 to SD3 is about taking more ownership, being more responsible, like taking lead in projects. Like you should be able to set direction for the project. Like this is technical direction for the project. So you should be able to see what are the problems that can come in future, like with this feature, or what are the issues that can happen once this goes into production, or once this goes live to the users. And not just that, like as an SD3, I think you'll have a lot more responsibilities, in the sense like you should be able to own the feature completely by yourself, like from designing the feature, like how should it be implemented, to implementing, to testing the feature, like working with QA teams. We will usually have QA teams who will be testing extensively, so working with them. And then rolling out, like basically we do not immediately push the changes to all the users. We gradually push so that we track the change, the track how the feature is affecting the users. So how we usually do is we like launch the feature to 1% of the users, track the metrics, like some metrics that we want to track, and see how they are performing, and then we slowly move. So these all things come under the responsibilities of an SD3. But an SD1, these are all not the expectations. So for an SD1, it will be like they'll be working on a small part of the bigger feature. Okay, like probably coding part they will do, coding and unit testing and stuff like that. But yeah, as an SD3, you will have to kind of own bigger projects and be able to come up with design ideas, like how do you want to implement the feature and stuff like that. I mean, which code base should you make changes to, and any dependencies on other binaries or other stacks. These all you'll have to think prior to coding. Like you'll have to write the designs and get approvals. I think these are all the main differences. I think SD3 will have more ownership and more responsibilities. And also they'll be more self-driven. Like SD1 constantly needs mentorship on how to implement stuff and how to like what to do. SD3 mostly work independently. Like once they understand the problem, they'll be able to come up with solutions and work on them independently. They don't need much guidance. So they will be able to figure out stuff. They will know, I mean, they'll figure out whom to ask the right questions. They'll figure out the right questions to ask and whom to ask. And then they'll ask them and get to know the answers, and then incorporate in the design and like coding. And of course, like if there are any SD2s are once working in the project, they'll set direction for them also, like guide them and help them grow. Basically, I think, yeah. So basically, qualities are being more independent of your work, like owning features end to end, and yeah, taking more ownership. I think are the most, and like having expertise in multiple things, not just coding, but like able to write the design doc, testing, and then rolling out, monitoring, all these things. These all kind of differentiate SD1 from SD3. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Akshit. Next question is, every time I think about solving problems, I feel like I am by hearting and not like doing myself. Did you also have that feeling? So Bharat, I think that feeling sometimes might happen, but I would say do not try to by heart solutions. That will not help you much. Like it might help you solving that particular question, but it will not help you much. But instead, understand the why they are solving in that particular way only. Like why are they, let's say if you're thinking about DP, why did they think of only that state? Instead of, once you see the solution, let's say let's take a simple example, longest increase in subsequence. So in that DP of I is what? No, I'm not by hearting around, but most of the problems I don't get until I see the solution. That is fine, Bharat. That is fine. If you don't get the solution, also that is fine. But what I'm trying to say is, once you see the solution, try to understand, like before you see the solution, and see what are the approaches that you tried. Like these are the approaches that I tried. Okay. And let's say you tried some DP approach. Okay. And you thought of some state. And now check what was the actual state that the solution was using. Is it same? If it is same, why weren't you, like once you have the DP state, like definition of a DP, why were you not able to write the recursion? That is what you want to think. Let's say your DP state was itself was wrong. Then think why your DP state was not giving the recursion. Why their DP state is giving the recursion. Like thinking like this, like instead of just understanding the solution, right? Also think what you had thought about, how you had thought about solving the question, and how they are solving the question, and try to bridge that gap. Okay, like if you also thought in the same direction, what was that extra step that is needed to get to the solution? If you thought in completely different direction, then think of what you can do, like what you can do to think in this direction. How do you map this question to this algorithm or this idea? That is how you want to think. Okay, so these are the things that you want to do once you look at a solution from editorial. Not just look at the solution and leave. Try to understand why you are not able to get to that solution. Yeah. So I think that is not just for competitive programming. So this is a very well-known concept known as feedback loop. It's not really taught in our childhood, like in our school times, but feedback loop is something, active feedback loop is something very useful when you're learning anything new. Okay. I think there was one question about this also. How do you learn anything new? I did not mention about this feedback loop. Feedback loop is very important in the sense that it will help you get better at something quicker. So the basic concept that I was saying at looking at editorials and thinking back why you are not able to do it, or how you could have approached the solution or the question to get to the solution, is about thinking in terms of feedback loop. Okay. So how you can get that feedback loop is kind of understanding what went wrong while you are solving the question. So it's for all, it's not just for competitive programming, it's for any new skill that you want to learn. Somehow, let's say you want to learn public speaking. So you can get this feedback loop from some mentors, or like you start speaking somewhere on bigger stages, or like for some set of people, and then try to get that feedback. So for any skill, this is useful. Sir, for referrals, should we approach recruiters also or employees? And like how to show your interest? Like I am very passionate about Android and wish to join Android team. Hey, Akshit, that's a great question. So for referrals, I think, yeah, approaching recruiters or employees should be fine. Like you can just ping them on LinkedIn. Some of them reply, some of them don't reply. But yeah, just approach them on LinkedIn. For showing interest, you can mention that. So how hiring works is mostly people, like companies hire because they have a requirement. Like it's very difficult. Like it generally becomes difficult to match your interest to the role that you want until and unless you can show your skills very well. So generally how hiring works is they hire a software engineer and then they try to see good fit for them, like, and where the requirement is in the team, and then they put them in the team. So mostly requirement should be there. If requirement is not there, then it's like they will definitely not take you. So to show your interest, I think putting them on resume on top is one thing, like you can say. Also, one other thing is, like if you have any HR rounds where or match fit rounds, some companies have candidate fit rounds. Like basically they'll see what candidate is fit for, like what their interests are. So in that you can mention. But also generally if you're talking to startups, like you can probably startups usually have some higher executive talking to you also. So mentioning in that meeting that these are my interests, do you have any roles? That is also something that is useful. So mostly escalating your point either through resume or through after the interviews to the interviewer or to any HR person that are in contact with you. So I think these are the ways that you can express your interest specifically. But yeah, but it is not guaranteed that like it's slightly difficult to get roles that you're really good at, but it's definitely worth a try. You should definitely try. If you're really interested in joining an Android team, you should let them know right at the start, like through your resume, during your interviews, during the HR rounds, or during any rounds that you take with them. You just need to mention that yeah, I'm very much interested in Android team and Android in general, and I would like to work in Android team, something like that. Sir, how do you approach a problem? I mean, you said you think of all the approaches, So if you can't think of anything, then try everything in you. Okay. Sometimes we read a question in a contest and we don't know how to solve, and there is no editorial. No, none of us know then how to solve it, sir. Okay, sure. Generally, I never used to solve contests which do not have an editorial, because I always used to solve contests on Codeforces, CodeChef, which usually had editorials always. So, I mean, at least during my preparation times, I never solved questions which did not have editorials. So I would highly suggest you to solve only contests which have editorials. But yeah, if they do not have editorials, I think one way is posting questions on any discussion forums. I think CodeChef discussion forums are quite active. You can try that. Or Yeah, I think first thing is avoiding contests which do not have editorials is better. Like try to solve only contests which have editorials because there are lots of resources. So why do you want to solve contests which do not have editorials? So I would highly suggest you solve only contests with editorials. So another question that you had was, if you can't think of any approach, then I would suggest uh, just list down all the approaches. What all, let's say DP. Okay, if let's say if I want to solve this question by DP, how do I want to solve? Let's say if I want to solve this question by binary search, how can I solve it? Let's say I want to construct a graph. Maybe how do I is a graph constructible from this problem? Will it help me? So these are some, like if you are not getting any idea, I mean, then that means that question is very much out of your reach. Okay, so usually what happens is you'll have some idea, like this is a graph question, this is a binary search question, this is a DP question, but you might not be able to figure out the details. But if you're not able to think of anything, any approach, then that question is definitely very much out of your reach. So then I would suggest immediately, like you can think, not spend a lot of time on thinking about that problem and just looking at the editorial and then kind of understanding how this approach is working. But if you're able to spending some time in understanding how the, like before looking at the editorial, I would suggest spending some time because this approach will work, like because you'll get some intuition, right? Because of the questions that you solved earlier, that this approach will work for this question. Then try to work out details on paper. If it is a DP, try to write DP state and then recursion. If it is a graph question, draw the graph and see how it is working, like some sample examples and stuff like that. But yeah, if you think that anything you do not know anything about the question, then I would suggest looking at the editorial quickly. And as you mentioned, if you do not have access to editorial, firstly, I suggest not to do problems which do not have editorials. Secondly, if you do not have any other option, I would say posting on online forums like Codeforce's discussion forums are quite active. So we can post questions there. Like post question in a, like generally what happens is people just post questions directly, like just copy paste the question. What works usually is explain the question in a very brief manner, and in the blog itself mention the approaches that you tried and why they did not work. And like when you do this, people see your effort and tend to reply to your question. I see. Okay, makes sense. So yeah, sure. In that case, I would say, like, yeah, we can post in Codeforce's blogs. But yeah, don't copy paste the question. People don't usually answer such questions. Maybe they'll answer, but it's less likely. Better approach would be like brief out the question, what the question is asking. Like usually questions have a lot of extra things, right? Like the story and all that. Like remove all that. Point the question very cleanly, constraints. Also, one other thing is that would be useful is like also mention your approaches that you tried. Okay, so these are the approaches that I tried and I'm stuck here. Can anyone please help? Something like this. If you show your effort that I had, so if you do not show that effort, like just copy paste the question, people usually don't reply. You mention, like you summarize the question, then you mention your approaches, and these are the things that I tried and I was not able to solve the question. Then people are mostly ready to help from what I observed. Okay. Sir, like you said, you use C++. So, sir, the type of library used for Gmail, did you know before the interview or you learned after getting into Google? Also, sir, some great project ideas for Android. Any good suggestion? Like as I mentioned, Google has everything internal to it. Like all of them have to be learned after you join. Like most of them are, except for language C++, like most of the tools, the coding infrastructure, how you build, how you raise reviews, code reviews, all of them are internal to Google. So you'll have to learn once you go there only. Like, and libraries and how the code base is structured, all of them are internal to Google, and like there is no way you can learn them before. So yeah, I learned them after joining Google only. And ideas for project, Android project ideas. I think if you're like at the beginner stage, any simple app, like probably people start with small games, I think. Then you can do slightly complicated ideas, like probably add some login system and like some tracking system, and like you can use some AWS backend, some cloud service where you can do some computation, storage. Yeah, I think, I don't know, you can take up any app, like any common, let's say you can take up, I don't know if you have ever used what do, like a to-do app, like you can make a to-do app, or if you want slightly more, to-do app is slightly on easier side. Maybe if you want slightly more complicated, what are the apps? You can actually think of apps that you use regularly. Like, okay, so maybe what, think of how to implement, like take small amount of features. So you need not implement all of WhatsApp features. You can think that, okay, message, typing message, and other person should be able to receive it, and they should be able to reply. Minimal, no other feature, like only one-to-one interaction. So you can think of a person must be able to add another user, and then both should be able to interact. Such simple feature you can think, instead of like thinking of big like even in the apps that you use, you can pick up small features that in them. So WhatsApp is one example, or Instagram might be a bit difficult because you have photos and stuff. But yeah, if you're slightly more accustomed to you building Android apps, you can try that also. Like image storage is something else. Like how do you store an image? How do you retrieve it fast and stuff like that? And what are the other apps that you use? So you can build some like simple app for an academy also. Maybe see like what does an academy do? What should its app interface look like? Probably instructors will schedule some. There should be a special login for instructors. There should be a special login for educator and for students, right? So whenever instructor posts some, and educator should be able to follow the instructor. And whenever educator posts some class or announces some class, students should get notified of that. So these simple features you can implement. Or if you want more complicated, okay, so basically means anything which could be used by as many people. Yes, Akshit. So you can pick up any app that you're doing, like just start with small set of features and keep adding to that. Okay, start with minimal features which are very easy to implement or which will take lesser time, and see how we are able to handle it, like how we are able to code, and like is it feasible. Once it is feasible, then start building more features. Okay, so this is for like examples I'm saying, so we can think of more ideas also specific to Android. Okay, so yeah, anything which could be used as, yeah, basically apps are, yeah, like user base is the most important thing, right, for apps and any website. Like more users use it, the better it is. So yeah, try to think of anything that is useful. If you're trying to build something new, think of a problem that you face on a daily basis which is not solved efficiently. Okay, so that is how all ideas come up. All new ideas, how do they come up is they think of something that is not efficient today. So there is a simple concept. So there is no service, or there is no service that was more efficient like 10 years ago than now. Like if you see Ola, Uber, long ago, how they used to be, there used to be some cabs. You need to go out of the railway station, go to that cabbie and argue with him for the rates, and then you'll get into it and go. Now you use Ola and Uber, like with a click, just a click, you get the cab to you, like cab comes to you and they take to whatever location you want to go. So, and many other things. Like world always goes in the direction of more efficiency only, like it never goes back. So things won't never get less efficient. Like earlier we used to book railway tickets. How did we used to book? We used to go to I don't know, you guys were there at the time or not, but we used to go to this line at the railway station, stand in the line, and then get the ticket for the reservation, and then that's how it used to. But now everything is online. Nobody, once you use this, we'll never go back there, right? We'll never go and stand in a line for a ticket. It will feel ridiculous. So think of in these terms, like what is the problem? Like how can you make it more efficient? Or if it is not efficient today, how can you make it more efficient? If you're thinking to build something new, I think this mindset can help you. Okay, is that helpful, Akshit? Yeah, I think those are some things that you can think of if you're trying to build something new. But yeah, uh, awesome. So, any more questions you guys have, or like, didn't if I did not answer any question well? So, how do Google hire offline resume shortlisting? Sure, I think uh, got it, off campus, right? So, campus hiring, I think mostly happens through referrals. Shri, yeah, for intern, sure. So I think getting referral is the easiest way to get off campus. Uh, Referrals you can get from any of the employees that you know, or like you can approach. You can approach people in LinkedIn, recruiters, and stuff like that. I think, but referral is the easiest way of getting a interview call than anything else. Like applying offline, like in portals and all this, are very difficult. Like people usually don't all those things. Referrals are the easiest way. So I would highly recommend getting a referral. But yeah, once you get an interview, then it's all about again coding, like DSA and algo. Only those questions are asked. So just be well prepared, and getting referral you can get from an employee or some recruiter. Contact them on LinkedIn. That is the best way. And like I would not suggest any other way. Like submitting your application, like resumes on online portals, those are not really effective, I would say. So I would instead spend time on getting referrals somehow, like ping as many people as possible, and then I think you'll get at least one referral. It's possible, like if you have good, like decent enough resume, I think you should be able to get a referral. And then it's all about coding after that. Okay. And what was the other question for intern? For projects in solution challenge, can you tell me briefly about that? Sorry, actually, I don't know what solution challenge is. Can you explain what that is? Sure. While you explain, I'll go to the next question. Do you do competitive coding on a daily basis, sir? Hey, Sri. So I used to do a lot in my college, but then I have been doing it often. Like I don't do it very regularly now, but hey, when I have some cousins and some friends, like some younger friends sometimes who keep asking me questions. So at that time I start like keep solving the questions. So yeah, that is how I do. Like nowadays, because I'm taking classes, I also like prepare for them. Like not all the concepts are very fresh in my mind, so I kind of revise some of them. And yeah, questions, I think like mostly when I solve them whenever people ask me. So yeah, and occasionally I do look at like for example this ACM ICPC and stuff like that. I look at some interesting contests from them. And then Codeforces also, sometimes there are this global rounds and stuff like that. I look at some questions in them, just like that, because they have interesting questions. So yeah, but that's less, like once in a while I just check some questions, if there is any interesting question or something like that. But yeah, not very active apart from that. And how do find a recruiter? Hey Raja, so I would say yes, recruiter finding is mostly about like pinging people in LinkedIn only, I guess. Or I think the best thing is if you know like any acquaintance if you have who is working in that company, that is the best way. Or yeah, if you do not know anyone, then I think pinging people on LinkedIn, getting connected, and yeah, that is the best way to find a recruiter. I would also say, like, if you can get hold of their email ID, like LinkedIn they might miss, but email, when you send an email to that people, then people will usually respond. Okay, so probably attaching your resume and the role you want to apply. If you send a mail, that will also be helpful instead of just pinging them over LinkedIn. LinkedIn people might not check that frequently. So if you can somehow get hold of their email, then sending a mail might be a better option. Okay. Hope that helped you understand. how to find a recruiter. Yeah, mostly on LinkedIn only, I would say. You can search on some, if it's a startup kind of thing, you can search on their website, like any openings. They might have some portals. Like startups might actually be looking at all the applications that they get. Like big companies usually tend to resort to referrals only, but startups and smaller companies might actually look at all the applications that they get. So yeah, in that, if you are looking for a role in startup, then you can try that, applying in their portal. Okay, so Akshit was asking, no sir, Google Design Sprint. It's a tool check and about project idea and all. Okay. So right. So Google Design Sprint. So for us, how it happens is like generally we have this set of OKRs, so objective key results. So anyways, so coming back to your question, Akshit. No sir, Google Design Sprint, it's just a tool. Yeah, so how it works, so we'll have this kind of OKRs, objective key results, which are set of things that we want to accomplish in next 6 months. Okay, so how it works is, for a team will decide some set of things. Let's say we want to improve the number of users by X%. This is our goal. Okay, that is the key result, that objective key result that we want to attain. So now all our projects will be based on that. Like, how do we improve this? And the key result will be attached with many projects. So these are the projects that we want to try. So let's say my key result was I want to improve the users by this much %. So first project could be advertising. Like, how do we increase the advertisement? Like, how do people get to know about this website a lot, or something like that? And secondly, so second thing would be user retention. Okay, so to increase the total number of users, we want to have the older retained. So how do we improve the user experience? So to an objective key result, OKR, we attach some set of projects. Okay, so if we do this will so doing all this will improve the overall. It will make us move towards the overall goal. So yeah, that is how these sprints are defined. And design ideas will come once these projects are fixed. Let's say first the OKR comes, then set of project ideas that will help us reach the OKR. Then for a project idea, there will be design, and then comes implementation, and then from implementation, testing, and then rolling out, and all this come. And after rollout to some, let's say rollout also doesn't happen. As I mentioned, it happens gradually. We first roll out to some 1% of the users, monitor the feature, then 10% of the users, then monitor. And if something goes wrong, we again roll back, like we revert the changes and see what is wrong. So that is how this whole sprint system works. Okay, hope that kind of answered that question a bit. So how does startup differs from Google Experiencer? So yes, so there are many differences in terms of big companies and startups. So the main differences are, firstly, startup will be very fast-paced environment, and it will expect you to learn things very quickly about many things. Work will be slightly unstructured in startups, because anything that comes up, there'll be only fixed number of people who needs to fix them. But in big companies, it will be structured. Let's say some issue comes up, it's not related to your code base, or something that you did not code. Then you will delegate it to the appropriate person, appropriate team. Let's say it is a bug related to serving, serving infrastructure. So serving infrastructure is basically the whole code base that kind of helps multiple binaries to talk each other. So let's say it is some bug in some serving. So we assign it to the serving team. But in startup, it's not like that. If a bug comes up and it needs to be fixed, someone has to fix it. Like, it doesn't matter which team you are in. And in that sense, it's a bit unstructured. But yeah, and learning will be quite rapid. And also, because one other thing in big companies is, because you are running such huge products, like products with so many users, things will move slow. Like, you need to get approvals for everything. You cannot just write some code and just check that into production. It will not happen. There will be a lot of reviews. Even for a small design, like even if you want to add some small feature, you need to get many approvals. Like, okay, this will not hurt anything. This will not hurt user experience in any way. So in startup, it's just because sheer number of the users, right? Let's say in a product like Gmail, something breaks. How many users will be affected? Like you saw, like recently there was some YouTube and all these were down, right? And it became a huge news. So it's just because of the number of users. Now, if service like Gmail becomes down because of the code that you write, then that shouldn't be happening, right? Like there are so many developers, and if everybody makes one such mistake every now and then how many times will Gmail be down? It will be down, like, I don't know, like every once in a week it will be down. That cannot happen, right? So that's why in big companies like this, there'll be lots of procedures and structures in place to make sure that things are checked in properly, and like nothing is breaking, like nothing trivial is breaking. Like for something to break, it has to be extremely uncommon or like very crazy bug, like kind of only those kind of things lead to this YouTube being Gmail down or YouTube down, something like this. Okay, so that is one thing that you'll in startups. You'll get to wear multiple hats, not just developer. You'll start talking with clients. You'll be mostly testing the code yourself, and yeah, you'll also be working with product managers and stuff like that. So in startups, you'll be wearing multiple hats. Like you'll be thinking about what new features you can add also. But in big companies, you'll have designated set of responsibilities which you need to do properly. So for example, testing, there'll be a separate team, QA testing, and for which features to implement, like there'll be like product managers who kind of talk to clients and understand what are the requirements, what are the pain points, and then from that they get ideas on what features to implement. Of course, developers also will give ideas, but it's not part of their responsibility. So in startups, you get to wear these multiple hats. So these are the key differences, I would say. And yeah, and another thing in startups is you'll have to do all. Let's say you want to set up a connection to some database. So in big companies, it's very easy. Like there will be some standard set of rules that you need to follow, like standard set of instructions that you need to follow. It will be done, but it's not so difficult. But in startups, you'll have to do all this groundwork, like setting up all these things. Like basically, you'll have to get your hands dirty on small things also. So yeah, in startups, you're expected to do all these things. Those are the key differences that I can think. Hope that helped your answer, Sri, regarding difference between startups and big companies like Google. Okay, so what are the things you learn from every SD one need to know? I mean, mistakes you made and learn from it and wished you knew before. Right. I think, yeah, that's a great question, Sri. So the mistakes that I made are like LinkedIn URL. Sure, I will do that. Just give me a moment. I'll just share my LinkedIn URL and then answer your question. Yeah, this is my LinkedIn. So yeah, mistakes I did as an SD1 and learned from them. So sure. So yeah, one thing is I clearly remember that when I joined, I was in a hurry to start working on a feature. Like I was not really concentrating on the basics a lot. Like there are many things, because I already mentioned it. Google has a lot of things that are internal to it. So I was of the impression that yeah, as I keep implementing, as I keep working on the feature, I will learn them. But that was slightly wrong, because after some time I came to a point that first I need to understand all of this properly. Only then I will, like after 2-3 months, I realized that this is not like the right way to do. So I would say get your basics right. That is one thing. Also, another thing is that is really useful is which very rarely we are not taught in school is like this communication skills. Like I think because 50 to 60% of the time you will be communicating with people, like either during meetings, either during emails. You'll be communicating with different sorts of people. So you need to be as clear as possible. You need to communicate your thought process very clearly to others. So I think communication is really something that is useful. I was not very good at it. Like I was very much of an introvert during my college times and even before that. But yeah, I think I improved to some extent. But yeah, I think you should also start working on your communication skills. Like it's not about fluency in the language, but it's about ability to communicate your thought process and ideas clearly. That is, I think, very important, not just in SDE roles, but in any other role. And other mistakes that I committed. So, I have to think. One mistake that I already mentioned is like not getting my basics right. I think that is something that you do not want to commit. And another thing is like once you are done completing the feature or some part of work, it really helps you if you can revisit what are the things that could have been done better, like by you. What are the things that you could have done so that the work that you had done could be better? This is a very important question, I think. So again, this comes to the feedback loop that I mentioned earlier, right? This is a feedback loop that you incorporate by yourself, right? So you ask this question to yourself: what could I have done better with respect to my work? So I think that is something. Incorporating that is very useful. I think if you can do that in early stages of your life, and if you can retain it towards like throughout all of your career, I think that is really useful, and it will help you grow much faster than you can even think of. Like retrospecting your own work and trying to improve based on that. Like if you, let's say, it's similar to competitive programming, like any other skill also. Like in competitive programming also, once you solve a question, or once you're not able to solve a question, just keep when you are not able to solve a question, when you look at the tutorial, just look at it and understand why you are not able to think in that direction, or if you're able to think, why you did not get to the solution. Like retrospecting your thought process and learning from it so that you don't commit the same mistake next time is a very useful skill, I think. That is something I would highly encourage you guys to learn, or try to learn at least. Like it's not an easy skill, but it's definitely useful. I mean, it'll help you grow a lot faster than you can expect. So keep learning from what you made and optimize it. Correct. That's exactly right, Sri. So trying not to commit the same mistake, and like learning from your mistakes as quickly as possible. So doing mistakes once or twice is not a problem. Like everybody does them, but difference between like a good candidate and like an average candidate comes from how quickly they learn from mistakes. So everybody does mistakes, same mistakes, but thing is, who will learn quickly from those mistakes? That is what will make a person grow faster, according to me at least. So yeah. Ayush asks, what are the new technologies that is beneficial to learn now, like cloud, machine learning, or blockchain, web development? Right. So yeah, currently blockchain, this whole crypto is in a lot of boom. But yeah, I mean, I potentially see some good amount of future in it, but not sure. Like you cannot bet on it right now. Like it'll be too early to bet on it. But I would say things in demand. I think coding and software engineering in general is in like a huge demand. I don't think there is any other field which pays so much for the amount of time you give. Like if you look at other sectors, like removing software engineering, if you take a mechanical engineer, or you take this banking, investing sectors, they work a lot. Like they get paid on par, but they work a lot, like 12 hours per day or something like that. So 12, 13 hours per, they work like crazy. So the reason why software engineering field is in so much of demand is mainly because the scalability. Like a product like Facebook or Instagram or like Google, like it can reach to so many people, like Gmail or anything. So these are the impact comes from the scalability, right? So that's why the software engineering companies are able to pay you a lot, because same amount of work you're able to do, but to a lot more users. For example, if you think of a mechanical engineer, what is happening? Like he can build one building. One building, it's a fixed, right? Like how many people can live in that building? Like probably some 1,000 people at max can live in it, but not more than that, right? He cannot scale it. But like, if he wants to scale it, he has to build another building. But with software, it's not like that, right? It's scalable. It's highly scalable, right? Anything that is scalable is something that will give you returns in long run. So in general, like software systems are very scalable. Like anything that you can, if you have code for something small, let's say, like initially when Gmail started, it wouldn't be handling billions of users. Now there are like 2-3 billion users for Gmail. So it might have started with some 1,000 users, but then slowly they are able to scale it up, right, easily. So that is how it works. So that's why software engineering field is in very much in boom. I would say like software engineering in general is very useful, and machine learning, yes, future is like in the future, like basically it will be like artificial intelligence plus human. Like artificial intelligence can never completely replace humans. Like there are many things that humans can do that artificial intelligence cannot do, and also there are similarly many things that artificial intelligence can do but humans cannot do. So in the future, artificial intelligence, AI plus humans will be the way it works. So machine learning is also a very good thing to work on. It's a very upcoming field. Like not like there are good amount of experts but not many. Like software engineering has a lot more experts now, but machine learning does not have that much deep experts as such. So yeah, that is also something you can invest on. Hope that answered your question, Ayush. Sir, Sir Akshit asks, sir, what does a person in Google does in initial days of SDN? Like, is there any training before and then, or like, is it? Is it not much of training? Like, people are expected to learn as a like initially, like 1-2 weeks. I think there'll be some normal. They'll give you some documents to read and understand. So they don't teach you as such. You will have to learn them on your own. There'll be some documentation for everything. So you'll have to go through them and understand them and like get your hands dirty by implementing them or like playing around them. So like nobody will come here and teach, okay, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that. But yeah, there'll be guidance for sure. Like if you're stuck at some point, there are always people to guide you, but nobody is going to spoon feed you. Like do this, do that, like that. So yeah, people will just guide you. They will just say like you can go through these docs and understand like how these things work, and that's all. You'll have to figure out things on your own. Yeah, initial days, I think after you become comfortable, they'll give you some project. I think it won't be more than like at max you'll have 1 month, I think so, before they get you into a project. So after that, like you'll have someone you're reporting to, your manager, and like some tech lead you'll have. So yeah, you'll be working closely with them, and they'll help you with further guidance on the project details and what parts you want to be working. So basically they'll tell you what part you have to be working, and how to work is something that you'll have to decide, like how to implement certain things, how to test it, how to document it. These are some things that you will have to learn on your own. Okay. Here is SV and Google. Awesome. Thank you, Akshit. And she is asking, sir, right now while working for Google, how much time do you work, and work pressure and family time, etc.? Okay. So it depends on day to day. Like some days I'll work for 7-8 hours. Some days it'll be like 9 hours maybe, and sometimes it'll be like not more than 4-5 hours. Depend, like basically when you're doing rollouts, right, you're monitoring something. Like you already have a great feature, it's being rolled out, and you're monitoring to make sure that nothing is going on. At that time, you'll not have much work. But if something breaks, then you'll have a lot of work. You'll have to fix it and then do a lot more other things. You'll have to run behind people to roll it back and get approvals for the new code and stuff like that. But if things are going right, it'll be like kind of chill. Like, but during coding phase, also it will be a bit chill. But during design phase, when you're actually designing the feature, right, like what are all the dependencies, you're for this feature, what are the future, like what are the issues that can come up. These all you'll be documenting in a something called design doc. At that time there'll be a lot of work, because you'll have to work with multiple people to understand what is the right design. Like you will have to ask the right questions to the right people and figure out how do you like what is the right what is the best way to solve it, what is the best solution for this problem. So at that time you'll have a lot of work. Sometimes it can be like 7-8 hours. And work pressure, I don't think I have a lot, I would say. But it's mostly like if you are doing things right, you will not have a lot of work pressure. Only when you do things wrong, like you break something, then you'll have a lot of pressure. Family time and personal time, I think, yeah, I do give a lot. Like I, on a regular basis, I do read books, I do play sports, and family time, yes, like when having meals and like sometimes like just playing some games with family and stuff like that. During weekends, I do give some time. Yeah, and like meeting friends, chilling out with friends, and yeah, all of these I do. So I kind of have this balance, I think. Like I give some fixed amount of time, not more than that, for work on a day, and then I try to complete my stuff in that stipulated time. And then yeah, I'll work on my own personal things, like for example taking these classes or reading some book or like playing sports. So these are all I do for the rest of my time. So sir, competitive coding, yeah, in the sense like it's helped in thinking critically, Sri. So right, competitive coding in the sense like you kind of think when a problem is given to you, you think critically, right? Like what are the edge cases? At least basically when you're doing competitive programming very seriously, at that time it's actually really essential to think in terms of corner cases, because sometimes so format ACM ICPC formats, how they work is like even if you get one test case wrong, you'll get a negative, and they will not even say how many test cases are wrong. You just get negative. That's all. So they'll just say wrong answer. So when the judging system is so strict, you are forced to think in terms of corner edge cases very critically. So that is something that I developed, I would say. And also optimized code, I would say, because of competitive coding, one thing that really helped is understanding code very quickly. Like optimizing code, I don't think is a lot of a concern in projects that I work on, but mostly understanding code is much easier for me. Like when I look at some code, I can quickly understand what they're trying to do, the logic behind it. Like it doesn't take much time for me. So that is something I think that that I was able to develop because of competitive programming, because I wrote a lot of code, and also I had gone through many codes while I was doing competitive, like codes from higher rated programmers, coders, and stuff like that. So yeah. So sir, in big companies like Google and all, or JP Morgan, Goldman and all, how to easy it to ask for relocation around country and or abroad? Okay, sure. Ayush, I think it depends from company to company. Like I can specifically tell for Google. For Google, it is very easy. Like if you want to switch teams or move out of a country, like after 1.5 years or so, you can easily move out of country. Like many people do it. Like once you get promoted or something like that, people just move out of countries or move to a different team. But again, like in Microsoft also, I have worked briefly for some time. So there it was difficult to move out of country. It was easier to move within teams. But moving out of country, I think like you had to work for like 5 to 6 years, I think so. It was a much longer period. But yeah, it definitely depends on the company, Ayush. So it is not something generic. I am not sure about JP Morgan, but one thing I think is like generally moving across teams is is something that most companies allow. Like moving locations is not something that all companies allow, but across teams you should be able to move easily. Okay, hope that answered your question, Ayush. So any good resources to perfect DSA skills? So perfect. So right. So there is like DSA is basically all about practice, Akshat, as I mentioned. Like you will have to develop that intuition and that thinking habit. Once you look at a question, you would like I mean, immediately you should be able to figure out what is the algorithm that you want to try, or like which approach you want to. So I think it's all about developing that intuition. Good resources. I mean, I think there is nothing better. There is no better resource than practicing consistently, I would say. So like practice until you get this confidence that once you look at a question, you kind of understand the approach automatically. Like you get a brief idea about what the approach is. So until then, you should keep practicing, I think. Okay. So she asks, any suggestions while facing technical interviews? Right, She. I think one suggestion I would give is practice some mock interviews, definitely, because like sometimes even if you're good at all these data structures and algorithms, sometimes just in that interview pressure or whatever, like in that you'll kind of feel zoned out. You don't, nothing comes to mind. You kind of feel like maybe you miss something or whatever. Like you, it's better, always better to give some mock interviews. And one other thing is always try to explain your thought process. Like whatever thought you get into your mind, even if it is very simple, just briefly explain. If it's very brute force algorithm, just briefly explain. Okay, this is the very very naive algorithm, brute force. This is the complexity. That's all. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Just briefly explain. This is the complexity, and this is the approach and stuff like that. So, and another thing is probably ask questions. Like sometimes questions might be vague. Ask for constraints. Ask for clarifications. Like do not assume things. Asking for clarifications and on constraints and question is something that I would highly recommend. Yeah, those are the things that I can think of on top of my mind for technical interviews. Hope that helped. Okay, and Raja asks, will filling out increases salary other country? Hey Raja, so how salaries work is basically they pay you based on the living standards at that country. Okay, so let's say people say like salaries of 1 crore, 2 crore, something like that in US. So, but that is because like if you look at the living standard, I mean living standard in the sense, how much are you like? Let me give you an example of what a living standard means. Let's say one person same for the same role, two persons are working. One person is working in US, one person is working in India. Let's say in India, that person can with his salary he can easily afford let's say some what can you say, like MacBook, let's say. Okay, and the same person, like the person working the same role in US also will be able to easily afford a MacBook, right? It's just that like the way they are living, the standard they are living will be the same, just because the living standard is higher there, right? Because of differences in like garments or like the way the things work over there. Their salaries might be usually 4 times higher than what it is in India. But one thing that definitely is helpful is the savings that you make, right? That will get multiplied. Let's say you're planning to work in other country. Let's say you're in US for 2 to 3 years and come back to India. Okay, and let's compare that with the person who worked those 2 to 3 years in India only. Both get some. This person gets some X salary, and the person working in US will get 4X salary, right? And both of them use, because both their living standards are similar. Both of them use some, let's say some X we took for salary, some Y% of their salary. So 100 minus X% will be left for savings. So what will be the actual saving amount? 100 minus X by 100 into 100 minus Y by Y into 100 minus Y by 100 into X, right? And for that guy, it will be 4X into 4X. Basically 4 times will be the savings. So only difference will be in the savings if you're coming back, if you're planning to come back to India. Okay. So basically those savings will be multiplied by 4. Otherwise, there will be no difference in living standards. Everything will be same. And if you're planning to stay in US only, then there will be no difference. Only difference comes if you're planning to come back to India, and your that savings will be multiplied by 4 basically when you compare it to working in India. That is the only difference. Is that clear, Raja? Hope that helped. Let me know if you have more questions on that. Which track will be better, Python or Java? Ayush, I don't think language is that much of a deal in generally, uh, because languages can be easily picked. I think I mean, yeah, some things will be different. Like for example, C++, Java, and Python implementation of concurrency, like threads, and all this might be different. But yeah, generally it is not that much of an issue. But to give you a more generic answer, Java might be more useful than Python if you're looking for development things, like development side of things, software developer. Python might be more useful if you're into machine learning and stuff like that. Okay, so yeah, depending on which track you want to go towards the development or machine learning, Java or Python, you can choose one of them. Right. And what is the other question? She is asking, sir, what are your thoughts on higher studies? Okay, first let's complete this. What are your thoughts on higher studies? Hey, Shi, so I think doing masters is not really helpful in a sense that, like, there are two good reasons to do masters according to me. One is if you want to get placed or get a job in foreign, that might be a good way. And another thing is if you want to get like let's say good role, maybe like right after the BTech you did not get a good role, then or the package you are expecting, then maybe doing masters might help. But just to increase your skills, definitely it is not useful, masters, because I think those 2 years if you spend doing a job, you're essentially learning new things in the professional setting. Also you're earning when compared to the fees you have to pay for a masters. So it's like an opportunity cost. It's not just the fees that you're paying, you're also not earning in that time. So if you're only thinking about improving your skills or like learning more, masters is not such a good idea, especially immediately after masters if you're planning to do work again, like be in professional field. So but if you're planning to do a PhD or like do higher studies and go in that direction, then I think, yeah, then it's definitely useful doing masters, that according to me. It's definitely useful. See, I mean, many people do that, like for roles like program management, product management, stuff like that. Depends again, like people, you can also learn them on your own, like in your office setting only. But some people, so mostly people do MBA for network actually. Like MBA network is usually very strong, because from MBA people do, like you get to meet people who do jobs in various domains. So that, like, one of the major reasons why people do MBA is for network actually, because skills, I think, yeah, in a professional setting you can learn them. Like I mean, if you are well experienced, like after some years you'll get to know how things work, how to get things done and stuff like that. But network is something MBA has to offer a lot. Like that is something that you cannot create on your own easily. So yeah, next, let's see, continue. Like I asked in session, to which I got like reply like some companies are code specific and they mostly demand Java and or Python in tech interview. If you use Python, you would as a diagram since it is easy. Can you comment on this? I mean, at least in Google interviews, this does not happen. Like if you use some Python language, people kind of don't look at you. That does not happen. So maybe, I don't know, like some other companies might do it. But yeah, generally it shouldn't matter. Any programming language you're comfortable in, you should be easily able to code and explain your solution. Like if you're able to clearly explain your solution, then it should be fine. Like it shouldn't be an issue. I don't know, maybe some smaller companies might look into this, like Python as something lesser, but in that case, maybe you want to learn Java. I mean, once you know Python, learning Java is not very difficult, I think so. Like there are some syntax things, but overall, the way the structure works, right? Like how the coding, how you code, what is the logic for code? Let's say you want to write some for loop, you want to put some break, you want to put some continue, you want to take input here and stuff like these things won't change. So this will always be the same. So you only thing you want to know is like some syntaxes, like, okay, fine, this is how I define an integer, or like this is how I take input, or this is how I write a for loop, or whatever. These are the small things that will change. That if you practice some questions, you'll automatically learn. So that's why I don't think companies should actually look at a particular language as something less. At least I have never done it personally, and I did not see any candidate being affected because of that in Google. But yeah, if you really think it is affecting, I would suggest you, learn Java. It shouldn't be much difficult. Like, you can learn it quickly if you know Python well. Hope that answered your question, Ayush. Raja asks ML or development. So you tell me, Raja, what do you like? Do you like ML or development? If you know the answer for that, then you know the answer for your question. What do you want to choose? So basically, it depends on your interest, Raja. Like, both of them have equal opportunities. At least in today's world, like there is nothing stopping from having so many opportunities in ML or development. Like, those are the skills that will be in boom, like even for like a couple of decades from now also. So Raja is saying I like all things. Sure. Then if you like both of them equally, whatever I get into, I will start liking it. I see. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, then you just choose whichever is easier for you, maybe. Like, for me, like, for example, personally, I used to enjoy data structures and algorithms a lot, like in general math and data structures, DSA a lot. So I eventually came into development. Like that, there must be something that must be interesting you more, right? So choose based on that. Like, because both of them are equally potential fields in terms of futures. So I would suggest you choose whichever feels right to you. Like, just because both of them are equal future, like there is nothing that one field is much higher, like pays a lot more salary than the other field, or one field might have a lot more opportunities, but eventually, yeah, ML also will make a lot more opportunities, is what I believe. So yeah, whatever you think is more, whatever interests you more, I think you should go with that. Like, I can say that. That's all. So yeah. So yeah, I think I answered. Did I miss any question by any chance? I hope not. Okay. So Ayush asks, sir, how much of your work revolves around DSA? Okay. So Ayush, as such, data structures and algorithms we don't use a lot, quite less, I would say. I mean, sometimes we use them, but not much. Like, most of them will have standard libraries and stuff like that built in already. So we don't use them a lot. So the reason why DSA is used as an interview criteria is like to test your like thinking process, how you, let's say you have some set of basic concepts. Okay, this is the algorithm, this is the data structure, and now you're given a problem. The thing they want to test is how you bring all of this together to solve the given problem. Like, there are some set of basic things that you need to know. Once you know them, how do you solve the question? This is what interviews like to test you, because that is what will be needed later. Because like in development also, there will be some set of things that you will know already. Now you will be given a new problem which you have never seen, and they would like to know. I mean, basically you would want to solve it like based on what all you know, like, or asking the right questions and stuff like that. So that is why a DSA is used as an criteria in interviews. But yeah, as such, in my day-to-day work, I don't think I use DSA a lot, very little, I would say. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, Ayush. Raja says, still confusion. Most probably development, as most of the known people are on it, will guide quickly. Makes sense, Raja. Yeah, just like any criteria that you can decide upon. Like, let's say you think that you can get more guidance on development, then sure, why not? Guidance is definitely required, I think. Like, especially once you get like more experienced in your profession, I think guidance will become much more rarer. Like at higher levels, like there won't be many people who are capable of guiding you, like mentoring you. So yeah, in that sense, you can choose development surely. So yeah, Ayush asks about OS, computer network and DBMS for non-CS students. Will they ask questions on it much? Hey Ayush, I don't think like at the beginner roles, I don't think they ask. You're from EC third year VIT Vellore. Sure, Ayush. I think for beginners, they don't ask a lot on OS, computer network and DBMS, mostly competitive programming and probably some logical questions on math, depending on the role. But yeah, some companies like Rubrik, I heard ask some questions on OS, but like not many companies really ask, especially at beginner fresher level. Though I don't think they ask. Like if you're applying for like slightly experienced, like 2 to 3 years of experience, then definitely they'll ask. But yeah, for fresher roles, I don't think many companies ask. Very few, very limited. I can count on my hands, I guess. Like I know of only Rubrik. It's a startup actually. It's a cloud computing startup. So, but yeah, I'm not sure if they're asking now also. Like during our placements, they did ask. I think some OS questions also. But yeah, it's very rare. So yeah, you need not worry about all those things, I guess, at least for interview sake. But probably like once you join, you might want to know these things also. Like basics of these things, you should definitely know. As a software engineer, like operating systems, computer network, DBMS, like at some point you will have to work, you'll need to be working on these things. So having basic awareness of all this is definitely useful, I would say. So yeah, uh, if not for interviews, just for yourself, like if you're planning to get into the developer role, I would highly suggest you go through, understand the basics of this. More you can learn when you're working on the job, but like you need to know at least some basics of all of these topics. But yeah, for interviews, I don't think it's very important, as I already mentioned. Okay. Hope that cleared your question, Ayush. So I have this Discord server where I post schedule for the classes and also like any questions that you guys like normally have. I'm not very active, but yeah, like I at least once or twice a day, once in a day or once in 2 days I check. So I'll definitely try to answer. So you can feel free to join. But yeah, how was ITB? Right. So yeah, it was great. I would say like basically there are some things that I regret about not like I was very much of an introvert during my IIT times, so I didn't really explore like basically I did not explore many things like I could have joined many clubs, like learned many things. I could have met so many people. I could have built so many connections. But yeah, I would suggest like in your college time, building connections is one of the best things that you can do. Like that sort of connections, like you will not get easily outside. Like so, I would highly recommend. I would highly recommend all of you, like in your who are in your college or going to college, whatever. So to try building connections, like those are really useful in your future also. Like because people from your college will work on like they'll not just your branch, I would say, like other branches also. Like I was only interacting with people from my branch, that too very limited number of people, but interacting people from with who are in other branches, because they will get to do other things, right? They will be in other domains, so you'll kind of have this interactions with them. You'll have this connection built, so you can at any like later in the life you can talk with them, and you learn a lot from that. So I would highly suggest you do that. And Raja says, can you take sessions on competitive programming? Yes, Raja, I am planning a micro course. I did not set the schedule. Like probably I'll take next Wednesday. I'm planning to take 2 to 3 classes, like on segment tree, Fenwick tree, and LCA probably. I will set the time and post it on the time after 7 p.m. please. Yes, Sri. Probably from 7 to 8:30, like 1.5 hour. I'm planning to take 7. I was thinking of taking at that time. So does anyone have issues with that, with those times? So I was thinking like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I will take 2 days or 3 days. I will take on those days. I'll post the schedule on the Discord server. You guys, if you are already on the server, then it should be easy. Otherwise, I'll also post the class. So if you follow me, you should be able to get some notification, I guess. She asked, how do you like the AMA session? Or we asked all dumb questions I expected more. No, I was actually scared that people will not ask questions and I'll have to sit idle. And happily that did not happen. You guys are very active in asking questions. No, and one more thing, no question is dumb question. Like you should always ask questions. You should not be afraid of asking questions. Like at least I do not see any question as dumb question. There is a reason why someone asked that question. So like the best thing is to just answer them, like instead of judging how the question is, like what the question is. So yeah, and yeah, I really enjoyed the session. Like like at the start of the session, I was a bit scared that people might not ask so many questions for 2 hours, but you guys were really interactive and asked a lot of questions, I think so. And hopefully I answered all of them well and you were able to take back something from my experience. Yeah, I'll definitely take some classes next week. During weekdays only I'll take, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll see my availability and post the sessions. I'll let you know on the Discord server. Sir, awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone. Yeah, feel free to post questions on Discord server also. I'll be happy to answer. But yeah, loved this session a lot and hope you all also liked it and have a great day or have a great night. Okay, cool. Bye.